Hey San Diego, welcome back to the Apartment Geek Weekly. I'm your host, Chris Robinson, and good to be back. Last week we talked about the 7 pillars, or I should say fundamentals of real estate investing. Think of it almost like the walls that hold up the house. If you there's these certain check boxes to kind of process when you're making a holistic, wise investment real estate purchase. Got some really nice feedback too, so I'm happy that pointed people in a helpful direction. This week, I'm excited about talking about diving in a little bit to calculating the return on the apartment complex. So, how is this thing performing? The cash flow. There's a little bit of like misunderstanding out there, and I hear a lot of people talk about IRR, which is it's a fairly sophisticated. I'm going to go out and say higher level way to make an asset or investment seem very attractive because it takes into consideration a longer period of time and certain assumptions as far as cashing out, pulling the equity back, selling the asset. So there's a lot of variables, and I just think I'm going to throw some people under the bus here. I think with IRR, it's a little bit of a kind of a sales tool to make the deal seem attractive to a limited partner or somebody's going to put money into the acquisition. So IRR, you can think about it, but again, I don't believe that that's what we want to focus on as far as when we're buying these properties. Instead of IRR, we want to focus on return on dollars invested into the property, the purchase in the property. Return on equity, cash on cash. These are the same thing. It's different definition for basically the same thing. This is going to be a real life indicator. I think like the speedometer on how this thing is going to perform. And I want to kind of go through that a little bit with the audience so that people hopefully can focus on this and understand that this is really where the juice is. And if they focus on this and they kind of look out like year one, 12 months out, this is what my return on equity is going to be. If that meets people's expectations, then the IRR is going to be through the roof. The long-term holistic performance is going to be excellent because that's what San Diego real estate does. It goes up in value. If you buy an asset, you focus on the return, it's going to give you a certain cash flow. You're going to crush it in 2-3 years, depending on whether you refinance it or you sell the asset and do a 1031. So what we want to look at, like on a $3 million building, if we put $1 million down payment, we get a loan for 2. That's going to be the kind of the equity in the deal. We also want to add to that what we're going to put into the building as far as capital improvements. So is it paint, 10 grand, landscaping, 5-10 grand. Maybe we have to do some remodels. So call that another 200-300. Call that another $200K. We have $1 million down payment plus another $200K in the deal. So those total dollars invested into the asset. That's basically your bottom. That's your equity chunk. That's what you have out of pocket in the deal. Call it equity. The return is basically going to be, right now with rent control, if we take over ownership today, there's definitely more moving parts to get rents up to closer to market. The COVID thing hasn't made it easier, and then we have the limitations on what we can do per year. So now I used to say, what can you do within 3-4 months? Now it's really kind of look out a year on the runway. So you buy a building, it's got gross income coming in, you're going to raise the rents as much as you can. Now you're going to focus, and I want to kind of talk about my underwriting. 3% vacancy allowance is what we typically use for San Diego multifamily. During 2008, 9, 10, when we had the whole last financial crisis, that caught, believe it or not, we were underwriting vacancy at 5%, so we took it up. That was a very weird anomaly. So we're kind of back to a super healthy market, 3% vacancy, which is essentially just the time it takes to replace a resident, clean the unit, do some fixing up, and then re-renting it. So gross income, 3%, and then you're going to have your expense allotment. And I wanted to mention something here. because I hear confusion on this out there. For any apartment complex in San Diego County, 5 units and above, 5, 10, 20 units, your expenses should be on the low end, 30% of all your income, of the gross income. 30% would be low. That would be maybe if you're renting it yourself, it's a super efficient property. It's all individually metered, but it's just an easy kind of a turnkey deal. 30% would be the low end. I typically use 33% of the income for all the expenses, and that's going to include your property taxes, insurance, repairs and maintenance, your business license, all your utilities, which water and sewer, trash, SDG&E, common area SDG&E, landscaping, if I didn't mention that, and repairs and maintenance we talked about. Repairs and maintenance, I typically will use like $800 to $900 per unit per year. So you can do your math depending on how big of the asset you're looking at. So if we get all that together, all property taxes, everything, it should be 30% of the low end, 40% on the high end on all your expenses, the ratio, expenses to income. 40% would be less efficient building, on-site management. The on-site manager is under payroll, so they're getting workers' comp. Stuff starts to add up sometimes on these bigger assets, especially with professional management, because we know, no, I'm not knocking professional management, but it can become the expenses can definitely go up. So 33% to 35% is typically what we see in San Diego for kind of your small, say call it 5 to 50 unit property range, maybe a little bit higher on the bigger properties. So if we look at that, those are all the expenses. Then you're going to get your cash. Then you're going to get your net operating income, and then you've got debt service, and you're going to go borrow $2 million on our example, and that's going to give you your debt service payment, which is going to be principal and interest, or just interest only, because there's a lot of interest only options out there. Now you've got your cash flow. So say you're making 56K, 50 or 60K a year, and that's your projection after 12 months. That's going to be in your top number, 50, 60,000, whatever it may be. Your bottom number, again, is all the dollars you put into the acquisition, plus the remodels or any kind of capital expenditures you did to make the asset look better and to help justify your rent increases. That gives us your essentially return on equity or cash on cash, the same thing with different names, basically. If you focus on that, and in the coastal markets or the really desirable markets, Mission Hills, Hillcrest, Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, Point Loma, etc., that number is going to be really low. I mean, that cash on cash is going to be 1%, 2%, maybe 3% if you look out 12 months. If you go into the middle of the row areas, you're maybe at 3%, 4%, 5% return on equity. This is kind of what I think it should be. And if you're in more of the, I call them tertiary markets or secondary markets, which are going to be a little bit harder to manage, you get a little bit more reward for going into those areas, i.e. Lakeside, Fallbrook, Ramona, great parts of San Diego County, but there's just not as much buyer demand because it's a little, there could be more moving parts on owning in those areas, or they're just further away from the home base of, call it the center of San Diego. Those areas should give you 5, 6, 7% cash on cash. You know, if you really look out 1 year and you figure out how you can raise your rents, etc. So if we focus on these numbers, cash on cash return, return on equity, what's the real nuts and bolts here? What am I really going to do after in this first year? If that pencils and it gets to your expectation, then your IRR, your long-term plan is going to be golden, because again, just buying in San Diego, getting your name on a deed is going to make that long-term IRR return very attractive. So it's like we don't even need to focus on that. So we're good. Next week, we're going to talk about the pitfalls of buying real estate. And I'm excited about this one because it's getting me to jog my earlier experiences about what to not do, or really what to be cautious for early on when you're purchasing investment real estate. So let me know what you think, and until then, be well, and thanks for tuning in.